What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well so far. Let's cut straight to the chase. About a week or two ago, I had people on my Discord. It's called the Fruit Basket. It's a really fun place to join it. We do fun stuff like this. I had them submit their predictions for Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 in a Google form. I gave them 3 slots for each chapter, and I got 16 responses, which is pretty good, because that means that I have 96 total answers, because there's 6 for each response. And today I want to go through and give my thoughts on what you guys said. I also made a bingo card, and in this bingo card, I think there's about 50 or so options that I consolidated from the responses, and I also inserted a few of my own. I'll have it linked in the description. It is for chapters 3 and 4 combined. There's endless combinations, because there's 50 responses, or options for the boxes, for 25 boxes, so it can go either way. And you should use it when you play the game to see how correct our theories were. I'll be doing that when I play the game live in 5 days, right? 5 days on stream. Wednesday, 10 a.m. EST. I'll be live playing at 11 a.m. when it drops, so be there. Also, while I go ahead and go up here, hello, hey guys, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and become a member to get lots of cool perks. Now, let's begin with the responses. Let's start with Chapter 3, Prediction 1. Rules card becomes more important. In Chapter 3, I'm not so certain. I do think that rules will be important later on, or at least more important than he is right now. He will probably have another scene where he kind of just shows up, is a clown, and then leaves. I think we will see something happen. Maybe like a Weird Route boss, because he seems to have some kind of cool power that he hasn't used yet, so that's a possibility. Chapter 3, I'm not entirely certain on, but I think at some point he will be. Egg's husband in Dark World, Asgore in the Dark World. This is my favorite idea for Chapter 3. I do think Asgore belongs in the Dark World more than Undyne or even Napstablook. I think Undyne had her time in Undertale. There's no need to really re-explore that. Napstablook, they had less time. We don't really know much about them. At least not as much as most characters. So this could be pretty good. But Asgore fits great because, one, this is the perfect chapter to talk about why Toriel and Asgore are divorced in Deltarune, what Asgore did that got him fired from the police force, and, you know, just the dynamic between the Dreamers with, you know, Asriel and Chris and their parents. I want to know more about that. And also, in a Chapter 4 teaser, Susie says, "Man, Chris, your family is weird." Not, "Oh, Toriel's weird," or your mom is weird. It's the family. So unless Asriel reappears, more than likely it's Asgore is the other person in the family who she's referring to. So I think this is a strong possibility and also the best one narratively. Tenna is going to try to get us to indulge in things that make us happy. So this is something that was briefly touched on in Chapter 2 with how people are kind of enslaved by the internet. Queen mentions it in her boss fight. It's not touched on quite as much as I would hope it would be. That's kind of a thing that I have a problem with, but it's still mentioned. It's not a major point in that chapter. I think it could be a major point in this chapter, how the media is used to sway us, to tempt us, to inform our minds on things, or, you know, just overall control us, right? That could be a possible use of this TV-themed Dark World. I think it's probably the most likely use. Also, once again, escapism, a classic topic in Deltarune, probably also come into play here. Birdly questions his sanity. Don't we all? Purple Soul. This seems pretty likely in Chapter 3 or 4 for a few reasons. So, for starters, if you subscribe to the theory that we're working backwards from the Undertale soul colors, like you fight the final bosses of those games with the red soul, before those bosses we have Mettaton, who is the yellow soul. Before Mettaton we have Muffet, who is the purple soul, and then Undyne is green, Sans is blue, in that order, right? Of course, Genocide puts some weird things on that, but still. In general, this is the order. And we had red last chapter, or Chapter 1, and then Chapter 2 was yellow, so we're due for purple, not green, in Chapter 3, purple in Chapter 3. I think if it's not in Chapter 3, Chapter 4 is pretty likely. This is assuming that these secret bosses that have unique soul gimmicks, which would be pretty cool, and I hope they do. Hopefully it's not just Spamton where that stops. So this seems pretty likely to me. Something different will happen if you didn't go back to Castletown in Chapter 2. The game heavily encourages you to go there and save, but isn't actually required. But what would happen if the stuff from the Computer Lab plus Lancer, Starwater, Rules card are with you in Chapter 3? That's a good point. I feel like... Okay, it could go either way, because this would be really interesting to implement, like a slightly alternate route where we didn't bring some of these side characters with us, like Lancer and Starwater and Rules. But it would also be really a lot of things to change, too. Like, you'd have to implement an entire new route, essentially, which could be kind of the weird route, maybe, in this case, where things go just a bit different. Also, we know that Chapters 3 and 4 are significantly bigger than Chapters 1 and 2. Like, twice as big, probably, as far as, like, file size. This could be why. There could be changes like this that don't change the overall story, but change, like, you know, various details that cause it to be bigger. This could be one of the details. The overworld will have a desert theme. This seems pretty possible. I've seen some fan art of this over the years. This is referring to Chapter 3 still, once again. This makes sense to me, because once again, cowboy is a thing, Western themed. I think at least some area of the overworld, maybe not the entire overworld, but some area makes sense. That's all I have to say about that. Acquiring the Shadow Mantle requires returning to a previous chapter. Which previous chapter is my question, because if this was Chapter 4 predictions, I think that'd be the case, where we can't beat the boss for Chapter 4 without getting a crystal from Chapter 3. Like, the whole, like, oh, the Chapter 3 fountain wasn't planned, Sham didn't know about it, that kind of thing, right? Could be that. I think it's neat how the items and the crystals carry over across saves. That could be also an important detail. We don't know how that'll interact with Chapters 3 and 4. Maybe if we get the items in Chapters 3 and 4, and then open a new save in Chapter 2, maybe those items from future chapters will already be in the little crack in the cliffs in Chapter 2, maybe. Then we have the Eggman. I think the Eggman appearing again is pretty likely. I'd be shocked if he didn't, actually. Naps Blue instead of Undyne. I already kind of talked about that. I think it's more likely. Still not my favorite of the options. I still like Asgore more. Woody Theory will not happen. Instead, it is a simple minigame of it being the Cowboy Shootout section. Is a simple minigame like the Punch-Out minigame from Chapter 2. This is a possibility, or alternatively, this minigame comes back like the Punch-Out minigame and ends up being a mechanic for the final boss or the secret boss. We also see like a shooting mechanic for the Shadow Men, right? So it could be kind of like that too. Secret boss is a cowboy. Classic, right? I think this is actually, it's not that insane. Woody Theory sounds crazy, but it's actually pretty probable in my opinion. Pretty well evidenced. El Nino and La Nino's battle will include, or it will introduce, blue and orange soul mechanics. This is an idea that I like a lot. I put this on the bingo card. It's a great theory. It makes sense to me. Sun and moon, that kind of thing. We're at about the point in the game where he's going to use these mechanics, which are, you know, pretty important. They appear a number of times in Undertale. This would be a good chance to do so. Pluby isn't a character. This seems pretty likely, sadly. It's probably some kind of mechanic, but it makes sense. Chris is not Kara. I already know who submitted this. I think we're not going to get any confirmation either way. I don't think that Toby intends to confirm either way, at least not yet. Metaton shows up, or is at least referenced, in a TV world. That could be it. It's interesting that Metaton was already kind of referenced in Chapter 2. Not really sure, like, their, like, wishes or their, like, desire kind of, like, fueled the Neo body or something like that. Not really sure how that worked, but if it happened there, it can happen here, especially since this is a TV-themed world. Alright, Section 2. Lancer returns as a more prominent character. More prominent than Chapter 2, hard to say. He didn't do a whole lot. He'll still be there, I'm sure, but I don't know how much he's going to do until, like, the last few chapters of the game. I feel like these middle chapters, he's kind of being sidelined. He was important in Chapter 1, obviously, because he was one of the main characters in Chapter 1. The middle chapters, he'll still be present to, like, make sure the players still know he exists, but I don't think he's going to do much of importance until the very end, I'd say. The Fun Doppelgang, this is a theory by, this is probably Foxworthy who said this, that Tenna will kind of cast doppelgangers for the Fun Gang and display them on the media to paint them in a bad light, to turn the world against them, I believe is the theory. Makes sense with the theming. very cool idea. Also, a secret boss against ourselves would go hard. Or just a boss in general would also, like, just a boss against the Fun Gang would be pretty cool to see. Toriel is barely around to keep her unaware of Dark Worlds. She doesn't need to be barely around because Noelle was very present and was still very easily convinced of it being a dream. So that... she'll still be pretty active, I feel like, but she'll probably still, by the end, be convinced that it was all a dream or something like along those lines, right? Berdly nipple mentioned at least once. If Berdly is there, it seems pretty likely. I think this is quite possible. Something catastrophic will happen that changes every theory. This is guaranteed. This is the only true theory, is that something is going to happen that shatters almost every other theory. Almost guarantee that. Toriel will not be fooled and oh, here's something the opposite. This theory is this theory to this theory. This is the catastrophic change that it was talking about. Toriel will not be fooled in thinking that Dark World was a dream like Noelle. She'll be much more important and relevant to the story. Quite possible. I do think that Noelle will eventually realize that it wasn't a dream. I think that it's inevitable. Toriel probably will at some point too. In this chapter, that would change things pretty severely. I think Chris wants that to happen. I think Chris wants other trusted adults like Undyne and Toriel to know about the Dark World, which is why they made the fountain, I think. The secret boss, this is Woody theory again. Okay, the boss isn't Mike. I think that's a pretty safe bet. I don't think Mike is a bad guy. I don't think Mike is a secret boss. I think Mike is Spamton's friend who was screwed over by Tenna and his crew, and is probably kind of like, I don't know, outcast, exiled. Maybe he's like the first shopkeeper that we see, kind of like Sweet Cap'n Cakes, where he's kind of just on the outside, like a rebellion, maybe kind of, maybe outside the studio in that weird like docks, dusty land. We meet him. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of here. I'm Mike. I was outcast. I can see that being a thing. So this is probably true. Susie won't let Noelle join the Dark World for her own safety, especially if something weird happens in chapter 4, something where the Dark Worlds are like more explicitly dangerous, which I think is pretty likely. I think that this is so random, but there's an extra space right here after the word safety. I think this is pretty likely that Susie will be like, hey, like the Dark World's like, it was fun, but now it's like serious business. Like this is saving the world, like dangerous kind of stuff. Stand back. I can see that being the case. Spam Tenna crumbs. This is, I think I know who this is. This is them talking about the Spamton and Tenna ship potentially being breadcrumbed in Chapter 3. Maybe, I guess, if you want to learn more server lore, then come to the server, because we have some interesting lore that we got from Gardic Phone involving this and other various characters. This is what I was saying about the minigame, the cowboy shooting minigame being a gimmick for the final boss. I think this is pretty possible. I've seen other theories like it'll be Susie Zilla, but will be like the gimmick. I think that I don't want every final boss to have like a second phase where it's like, oh, new gimmick or that kind of thing. I hope that every so often, maybe every other chapter, we see a boss that's just like King, where it's just like a normal Deltarune battle, but harder and more grand. The Queen thing was cool, but I don't want it to happen every chapter. Toriel notices the Azrael and Ralsei similarities. If Toriel and Ralsei meet, they're going to notice, unless Ralsei puts on his hat when she's around. One of the most compelling things here is, what will Ralsei do when he sees Toriel, and what does that imply about what he knows and who he is? Mike is mentioned, guaranteed. Spamton returns because of Mike. Maybe not prominent, but at least mentioned. I think mentioned is pretty likely. I think a mention, I would be, maybe not even by name, but like by just like a reference of some kind is very, very likely. But I don't know if we'll see Spamton physically here. I would kind of doubt it, but yeah. No, I refuse to shut up about Pluie. I think Pluie is the most important thing here. Chris's Frisk. Once again, I don't think we're going to get any explicit information about who Chris is supposed to be. I think Chris is just Chris. flat out. I don't think Toby's going to tell us regardless because he wants us to think about it. Susie tail reveal? Be pretty funny. I like to see that. This is section 3 for chapter 3. Black Mirror, Tenna. I haven't seen Black Mirror, but I know it's pretty like psychological and weird. I hope Tenna is a truly pure evil, kind of intimidating, spooky villain who uses the media and psychological stuff to his advantage. And like, unlike King, who was scary at first and then became a clown later, I hope Tenna either just dies in chapter 3 or stays evil and just like won't change. That would go hard. Okay, King didn't change. He's still a bad person, but he's just like, he's played for comedic effect now, which I don't. It's funny, but it kind of ruins the impact of like, wow, this is like one of the first pure evil characters in Toby Fox land. We'll learn about Chris's family via Tenna accounting stories of them because it says he would have heard. Oh, this is true. Tenna, if Tenna, well, not really. If it's pretty much confirmed. Tenna being the TV in the living room means that Tenna would have heard everything from the Dreamer family, what happened to them, the divorce potentially, that kind of thing. Unless Tenna being turned off for so long and collecting dust meant that he didn't hear much of what happened. Perhaps that's why Tenna is mad, because he was turned off and left abandoned for so long. Birdly screen time, I wouldn't count on it, at least not in chapter 3, but I think chapter 4 is possible. Chapter ends with the fun getting in a fight, or 4 begins with a fight. Possible, I would say it's more likely for 4 ends in a fight, or 5 begins in a fight, because I think that we're going to end with like waking up in the house, that kind of thing. I think people think that the intro area is dark and spooky because it's dangerous. Perhaps it's just because it's nighttime. This is a possibility. Perhaps the level of darkness in an area impacts just how the dark world takes shape, because the closet was pretty dark, and the closet was dark in the dark world too. Maybe this is like inside the couch, but I think that is quite a strong possibility that the chapter like happening at night in the dark world existing at night will change things because of the Sham dialogue, and I talked about it in a whole video where I talked about Darker Than Dark. Mike will be a character, already mentioned. Birdly wants to stay relevant, he definitely does. That's guaranteed. Toriel can be manipulated, kind of like Noelle, I guess, but not for mass murder. Hence the not applicable but from the Spanish Sweepstakes ARG. I think this is a possibility. There's going to be some kind of action that occurs that like is messed up, I think. But if it's the same thing where we take someone who Chris cares about and use them to like make said person, okay, Chris, let's kill some monsters, human, I remember your genocides type thing, that's going to lose the impact that chapter 2 had, because that one was pretty disturbing. More so than than Genocide and Undertale, I'd say, because it's more psychological, more personal. If it happened again, I feel like it would be less impactful, so something different for sure. Tenna is hot. This is our next Tumblr sexy man. That's not even a joke. I think that is quite a strong possibility that Tenna is a strong contender for Tumblr sexy man at some point. Image friend will appear in this chapter. Very, very strong possibility. If not this one, then a future chapter involving Noelle. Friend Cat, I think, also an extra space here as well. I think that the new information in the sweepstakes with the image friend jump scare heavily suggests this, because they're associated with cats now very strongly. This makes a lot of sense, like a Cheshire cat kind of thing. Tenna stops being evil. I really hope not, but it's possible. Bluey is a feature. Yes, I fully agree. What's funny is that the person that said Bluey isn't a character shut up about Bluey and Bluey is a feature, same person, I think, because they're in the same slot. So this is what I think is probably true, to be honest. This is also the same person. People who believe that Chris is Kara will still not grow up. I think there's growing up to be done on all sides, truly. I think we all need to improve ourselves and be more respectful in the community about theories and whatnot, because they're just theory. But hey, that's just a theory. A be kind to your friends theory. On to Chapter 4, Hospital Dark World. I have a hard time swallowing that pill. Noelle's house, I could give like a 5% chance to. Hospital, Chapter 4, I wouldn't say so. Rudy will still be relevant, I think. Hospital Dark World later on could happen. Lord of the Hammer being relevant, I think this would go really hard. A fantasy-themed Dark World using books or religion, maybe, as escapism. With Gerson's Lord of the Hammer series, of course, Alvin will probably be pretty important in that chapter. So that would make sense. The beginning of the chapter is unexpected because we fall asleep during prayer. So, Chapter 3, it's going to be a long night. We're going to go to church, and as soon as prayer starts, this happens to me too. We bow our heads, close our eyes, and we're just out. And then we wake up, and then boom, we're in the Dark World. I can see that happening. This is actually a very strong possibility, one that I like a lot. Caddy and Jockington. This is a strong possibility. Jockington growing the beard is something that we have seen footage of or a screenshot of. So either he's in the Dark World, and therefore Caddy likely is too, like Noelle and Burnley were, or there's something that strongly relates Jockington to the Dark World, like some object in the room, for example. But I think them being there is more likely. Green Soul, like I said, this goes in the order. I think it's pretty likely at some point in one of these two chapters, especially Chapter 4. More angel lore, because it's a church. More prophecy lore. This is almost guaranteed to me. This is like the perfect alley-oop. Probably why Toby did this, to be honest, is to give more lore. Pluie is the overworld save point. Once again, a strong possibility. I've seen that mentioned a few times. I think I mentioned that in my theory, actually, the Pluie theory. So, quite possible. Darker Than Dark caused the color changes in Chris and Susie. I have a whole video on this. It's actually my most popular video to date. And I say this is a possibility. I still think that it's lighting, to be honest, but this is like one of the other possibilities I would think. Rudy dies. Rudy dying could be kind of the cliffhanger for Chapter 5. Let's say Rudy dies, and Noelle crashes out and makes a Dark Fountain in the hospital and tries to save him. To like heal him, that kind of thing. Quite possible. I think this is pretty likely that he's dying at some point. Rudy is not going to survive, I'm going to be honest. The gay are weird root exclusive, or they're more common there. The Twitter post from last week did make that battle seem kind of ominous. So I mentioned that there's also theories that the gay are like piles of Burley's dust, essentially, that kind of thing. I don't think that's true, but I think that them being weird route exclusive is possible. I think more likely it's just a kind of a tone change in Chapter 4, but this is also possible. Chapter 4 has the true Roaring Night reveal, possibly teasing a battle in Chapter 5. This could also be the battle that like closes Chapter 4 and starts Chapter 5, where maybe that scene with Chris and Susie running is them trying to chase the night as the Dark World collapses around them, and we catch up, we Scooby-Doo, let's pull off that mask, let's see who's under that mask, and it's Icy or whatever, and then Chapter 5 we're like, alright, it's time to duke it out. That could happen. Noelle will be significant, but not a party member. Yeah, I think it's possible. I think this would also be a great place to introduce a party swap mechanic where we can swap out Noelle and Rousey and cause possibly some second act low point tension there. Jockington is a boss. Lancer was a boss. Susie was a boss. Birdley was a boss. This could be the case. I don't think Jockington is the kind of guy to antagonize the party the way that Birdley did, or be so easily swayed, unless the bishop or whoever the boss is like, I'll give you some sports if you follow me. It's like, okay, sure. I don't think we're gonna fight, but I guess it's possible. Maybe he protects Caddy. That could be it. Even if it's like false or misguided, he would still do that probably. Rousey's a prince. We know this. He doesn't have followers. Where did he come from? Who are his parents? Why is he a prince? This is a theory that was mentioned in the Discord theory review. This is one that I am rather fond of, because if Rousey's a prince, then who's the king? Obviously, he looks a lot like the king and queen from Undertale. My theory is that Gaster made Rousey, made him a prince, based him off of the prince in Like he made him the Prince of the Dark and then based him off the Prince in Undertale, which he would know because Gaster logic. It's not fully fleshed out, but that's kind of my idea. Pluby isn't a big deal. Probably not in chapter... Well, I feel like Pluby could be more of a big deal in chapter 4 than chapter 3. That's more likely to me. Especially with the whole Light World save mechanic. Chris isn't a separate entity from the soul, or from Chris and Kara. Not which sure, or from Frisk and Kara rather. Pizza Pants opens a Dark World. They would. Their life sucks. One of the stronger contenders. Caddy, Belmont, and Cool Whip Jockington. I assume this is a Castlevania kind of reference. And the hope is that the Chapter 4 Dark World will be kind of like Castlevania, which is actually a pretty cool idea. Like a Castlevania pilled Dark World with Caddy and Jockington as the Belmonts. We have the beginning of the chapter. We catch a glimpse of the knight before they flee. Strong possibility. I mentioned kind of us catching a knight at the end of chapter 4. Maybe our motive here, besides just sealing the fountain, because at some point we need to find a motive besides reach the end and seal the fountain. We need to have a more strong reason to keep doing this. I think us catching the knight will be what kind of leads us along in chapter 4. Timmy, Dark World, just kind of there to spread eggs and stuff. Yeah, I think most characters in the class will not get the attention that Noelle and Birdley got. I think it'll stop at Jockington and Caddy. I don't expect to see Monster Teen or Temmie, for example, do anything super major. But if she's down there and just the eggs, that's pretty cool, I guess. Darker World, once again, it's a pretty common theory that I mentioned before. Chapter will end at Flower King. The locked double doors is screen Dark World here to me. I agree. I mentioned that in a video a long time ago. Double doors are a pretty strong indicator of a possible Dark World. It would also be a cool place to explore. Once again, there's flowers there, so Flowey. Asdor's there, so we get Asdor lore. Aslore. Definitely a possibility. The knight will appear any amount, little or a lot. I think chapter 4 is the place to do that. Jockington battle, already talked about that. Gerson Boom, I don't know what his name is, that old fart turtle, comes back as a ghost. This is like Jaru's Oberon Smog theory. Jaru just loves dust reincarnating as characters. So his theory was that the dust on Gerson's hammer will kind of reincarnate as like a darkener, lightener mix kind of thing. Hybrid, I think. This, I think, is less crackpot than that. I think that Gerson will be at least somewhat relevant. He'll be mentioned a few times in chapter 4. Rudy tries going to church but starts coughing, gets worse. This, I think, is very likely. Gerson's not going to... Oh, not Gerson. Rudy is not going to church in chapter 4. Him saying, oh yeah, I'll be able to make it tomorrow. That's a massive flag that he's not going to be there, I think. Because he gets worse. Or dies. Also here, he gets worse. This chapter, the prep for the festival happens. That might explain why there's more Light World time. Festival is chapter 5 because of the balloon teaser, I think, is solid evidence. Noelle's house is visited. Pretty likely as well, I think, because of that teaser image as well. Church is more prominent. Church is more than likely the whole Dark World, I think, because, once again, 5% Noelle's house. The rest is church. More bunker lore. This early, maybe not, but once again, there is Light World time, so I think we get... Okay, I think that the odds of us getting more bunker lore in general is pretty high. Us going into the bunker, maybe not so much, but finding out what's up with it, at least somewhat, I think is pretty likely in chapter 4 because we're going to have plenty of time in the Light World to figure it out. Pluby isn't a lime. Sad, but probably true. Chris isn't another soul. As in, we're controlling Chris's soul, not our soul is in Chris. That's possible, I guess. Noelle and Susie confess to each other or to their sins. Because I can see either way. I think a love confession would come later. Susie repents of her sins, I guess. I don't know what... This is very brief, not very elaborated, so I'm not sure what to say about that. I think some kind of repentance or other religious actions are quite probable. For example, the majority of the chapter begins when we find the main villain of the chapter who casts us down to the bottom of hell. We have to climb up and reach the top of the towers. That, to me, could kind of tie into this, where the boss is this religious figure, like the bishop, for example, who is corrupt, which is sadly a pretty common thing in the real world. It's a minority, I'll say, but it's unfortunately a pretty common medium for that kind of thing. He casts us down to hell. He damns us to hell, or they, I guess it doesn't have to be a he, casts us down to hell, and our goal is to climb out, which is why we see Chris and Susie climbing in the trailer. Mayor holiday reveal, pretty likely. I think this is the place to do it at some point in chapter 3 or 4, especially if she's the knight. Great place to do so. Papyrus, chapter 4 has a long hometown segment. Maybe long enough with Papyrus, if we have different options to choose, that kind of stuff in dialogue, we can save before we go hang out with him, and then we can see what he says with different dialogue options, and it also prevents us from having to replay the entire chapter in order to do it again. Especially if the chapter 4 final boss happens in the Dark World, and the save is before that. Imagine we save in the Dark World, fight the boss, leave the Dark World, seal the fountain, all that, and then have Light World time. But we can't save in the Light World, and we have to go back to before the final boss. That would be kind of stupid. So I think that no matter what happens, if you believe in 2 Dark Worlds, for example, or this or that, I think that there being a Light World save point is pretty nice for this reason, to try out other dialogue options. With Papyrus, maybe. Chapter 5, Dark World, is revealed as a teaser for the next chapter. Seems a bit, already been done with chapter 2 to 3 with that reveal. I think Knight lore or Gaster lore, that kind of thing, is more likely. More character-based than like action-based, I think. Or like location-based. Speaking of which, cliffhanger scene will be Gaster's reveal. That would go hard. Wing Gaster. More explosions, guaranteed. Caddy using Jockington as a weapon in the Dark World, just like a staff. Because in the Bible, there were magicians that could turn staffs into serpents. That's in Exodus, I believe. And also, characters like Jafar, for example, from Aladdin, has like a serpent staff. What if she just like uses him as a staff and swings him around? That would go really hard, actually. I want to see that so badly now. Please let that happen. Noelle's house isn't a Dark World, but just a Light World segment. This will probably be the long Light World segment. Yeah. This, to me, is one of the more likely things that I've read so far. This is not a hot take, but yeah, this is pretty likely to happen. Caddy, Jockington in the Dark World, once again, pretty likely to happen as well. Pluie appears. If Pluie is a character, great. I'm not sure if Pluie can appear, but Pluie will exist in some variety. Nothing else. Hi, Bucky. How are you doing? What's poppin'? Nice hair. Very nice. Very orange. Sorry. Not orange. Anywho, thank you for all the work you do. We all appreciate you, especially me, your favorite Cersei. XOXOXO. Anyway, bye. Have fun making a video. You're currently talking about Hobbit toe hair in voice chat and saying peak. Thanks, Cersei. XOXO. Jockington grows a beard. Not the beard. He grows a beard. That one's... I don't know about that. He grows the beard. That's the beard to you. And then finally, the people who think Chris is a separate entity still won't grow up. There's lots of salt in this person, and I know who it is. I won't say who it is. People who choose to say their names... That's on you. Here, I'll go ahead and spare you the hate in the comments. But once again, be sure to respect all theories, even if you think some are stupid. Like piles of Azrael's dust, stupid theory. I think so. But I'm not gonna hate on Jaru. I'm not gonna tell him to grow up. He has fun with it, right? And that's kind of why I'm here, is to have fun. So be sure to keep your priorities with having fun with theories, that kind of stuff, in line. Obviously, you want to be right. hopefully I'm right. Hopefully you're right. But more importantly, have a good time. That's going to be all for today's video. We are nearing Deltarune so soon. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, you must like the video, so why not like the video? Thanks for watching. Also, a shout out to Rosie Pixels, Frisky512, Blake the Snake, aherman24, Glee, Foxworthy, the amazing Fruit Salad. Remember, oh, there's 2 of them now, actually. I stand corrected. We have Calm Luke and Hufflepuff Prefect, and then also our literally insane, crazy juice member, Tybee. With that in mind, I love you guys. Be safe, be smart, don't be stupid, and have a great rest of your day.